Hey folks, it's Pastor Rick, your Utah wine pastor, and today I've got another memorable meal for you. This one from Scleto Modern Italian Restaurant in Sandy, Utah. And I also want to give a kind of a special shout out to Sheral Schowe again from the Wasatch Academy of Wine for her offering of 6 really interesting wines for this class on French wine. Turns out that she brought 2 wines from the Alsace, 2 from Burgundy, and 2 from one of my favorite regions, the Rhone region. And so I'll make comments on each of those in just a minute. But I want to tell you that last month I went to her class on Italian wines, and I went by myself and had such a good time that I wanted to bring Bonnie along with me this time. Now, of course, Bonnie loves French wine almost as much as I do. And tonight, or I guess Tuesday night, we had a great time and 2 great meals that ended up being wonderful pairings for the wines that Sheral brought. Bonnie had a grilled salmon dish served on a bed of lemon risotto. And it came with a tomato relish and a shaved fennel salad. And it just went wonderfully well with the very first wine of the night, a 2021 Joseph Catin Orange Pinot Gris. Now, that word orange was not a misprint. And of course, it's not made from oranges, and it didn't even taste like oranges. But that word orange refers to the wine's color. It wasn't bright orange. It had kind of a bit of a copper tinge that comes from, as I learned out, from making this white wine grape in a red wine making style. The winemaker will leave the grape skins that have this light copper color on the vine. They would let the skins remain in contact with the juice after they're pressed. In fact, those skins get punched down into the fermenting juice over and over until the juice gets that characteristic copper tinge. Now, this particular wine was 4 years old, but it still tasted really bright and fresh, and it was dry without being too dry. And it reminded me a very little bit of a kind of a toned down Gewürztraminer. And if you know anything about Gewürztraminer, sometimes it can be so perfumey that it kind of puts you off a little bit. At least it does Bonnie. But this wine was floral without being too perfumey. And all in all, it just went great with the salmon. And of course, it went really well with the Caesar salad that was part of my meal. And it just ended up being a really great start to the evening. The second wine that was served was also a white wine from the same maker, Joseph Catin, from the same region, the Alsace. But it was a different grape variety, Riesling this time. Now, I have to tell you that this particular wine of the 6 was my least favorite of the night. And while I usually like bone-dry Rieslings, which this certainly was, this wine had a very pronounced mineral aroma in the glass that bordered on the smell of petroleum products. And while it didn't taste like petroleum or petroleum products, the nose was so strong that it kind of distracted me from what was otherwise a very pleasant enough tasting wine. The third wine was also a white, this one from Burgundy. And this wine came with a lesson. I had always thought that the only white grape grown in Burgundy was Chardonnay. And according to Sheral, it turns out that 99% is Chardonnay, but the remaining 1% is another varietal called Aligoté. And so this wine was a 2021 Domaine Sorin Coquard Aligoté. And it had a a light straw color with a really pretty, slightly green tinge along the edge. And I would tell you that this wine is definitely made to go with food. The first sip gives you that bright, clean, well-made, medium-bodied impression. There's obviously some good fruit there, and it had a nice round mouthfeel finish. But what really sold me on this wine was the finish. There was something earthy and herbal going on there. I couldn't put my finger on it, but Sheral described it as tasting sort of as a dried cheese. And then when I took a bite of the shaved Parmesan on my Caesar salad and followed that up with a sip of this wine, the two just seemed made for each other. The pairing was very nice. Well, now we came to the time of the evening where it was the time to graduate to the red wines. And I had ordered my dinner with red wines in mind. Now, Scleto Restaurant there in Sandy did a really nice job on the braised short rib that I ordered. It was slow cooked, a really healthy portion, and amazingly tender. The short rib was served on a bed of roasted garlic mashed potatoes with caramelized shallots. I'd never had that before, but it had caramelized shallots and a red wine au jus that was thickened just enough to kind of make it almost a gravy that went so great with the potatoes. Now, the meat itself wasn't overly spiced, but it held up really well to the three red wines that were offered. And I have to tell you, I'm going to have to try doing caramelized shallots at home after my experience with them there at Scleto. They just ended up having a real depth of flavor that was such a nice complement to the entire dish and to the wines for that matter. The first of these red wines of the night was a 2020 Roche. I'm not going to say it right probably, but it's a Rochebon, Rochebin, Haute de Nuit, La Tour du Bois. And it's made in the upper Côte de Nuit region in Burgundy. And of course, being from Burgundy, it was 100% Pinot Noir. The color was this bright ruby red, and this wine had a hint of leather and spice on the nose. Now, Bonnie and I have been drinking Pinot Noir with salmon for years, and this wine went fantastically well with her grilled salmon dish. The wine had an elegance and a silkiness that was just pure Burgundy, and I also enjoyed it with my short rib dish. Though the delicacy of that Pinot Noir grape was kind of overshadowed by the depth of flavor of my entree. That being said, it was a really excellent wine, and I should have bought at least one bottle of it. And now I'm kicking myself for not doing so. If you know anything about red Burgundy, it's generally very pricey, usually too pricey for me, but this wine would have been a steal at $30. What was I thinking? I don't know. Maybe I was thinking about how much I enjoyed the last two red wines from, again, one of my very favorite wine regions in France, the Rhone region. The first one of these Rhone wines was a 2020 Domaine Font de Cortedon from a village and an area that I had not heard of in the past. It's called the Vaucluse. And it turns out this region, and I didn't know this either, is the truffle capital of France. And the wines of this region often have that earthiness, this kind of part of that terroir, of that whole part of France. This particular domain is on the border of the Rhone and the area of Provence, and the wine had a a really deep, dark, almost inky color. It was sort of the first clue as to what the depth of flavor of this wine was going to be. It was really rich and saturated, full of those kinds of red and black fruit flavors that you expect from the Southern Rhone. And of course, this wine also had that real classic structure. It certainly wasn't a fruit bomb like some California red wines tend to be. And I would just say, of course, I really enjoyed this wine. It was great with my meal of that braised short rib. But the star of the night for me was the second Rhone wine that was served. It was a 2019 Cru Saint Martin Les Espaliers from the village of Gigondas. As a matter of fact, it was so good that I forgot to write down any notes about it other than star of the night. I've had wines from Gigondas before, and it kind of follows that general rule that you learn about how to follow French wines. And it turns out that the narrower the region that the grapes come from, the better the wine is. And so wines that are labeled Côte de Rhône, where they can get grapes from anywhere in the region, they tend to be good. Village wines, say from villages of like Baccarat or Crozes Hermitage or Gigondas, tend to be a little better because those grapes come from a narrower area. And if you could get wines made from a single vineyard, like La Landon in Côte Rôtie, be prepared to be blown away both by the quality and by the price. Like La Landon Côte Rôtie goes for over $500 a bottle if you could find it. Now, I would say this. No one will mistake this Gigondas that we had on Tuesday for La Landon. But I would tell you that I loved it and I couldn't resist buying a bottle of it. It had those characteristic deep red fruit flavors, a lot of structure, and that peppery component that's so very often prominent in quality red wines from this region. The wine had class, style, and the finesse that I've really come to love and appreciate in French wine. It was really excellent, and I'd buy more if I could. So I guess I will leave it at that. Thanks again to Sheral Schowe and Scleto for um, putting together another memorable meal. Cheers and amen.